Hello everyone, I am Wei Jingwu. I'm from China Unicom Institute. I'm very happy to participate in today's summit about the 5G millimeter wave. We know that with the joint effort of the China Unicom is dedicated to the high-speed development of 5G, and we achieved two tasks. First one is we built the world's largest 5G SA network. And secondly, we promote a kind of model, a co-construction and sharing network, and we can make it operating in a sound and effective way. And now China Unicom is dedicated to promote 5G, to advance to 5G advanced, and also to promote 5G kind of a synergy and coverage with our micro scenario, so that the 5G SA can contribute to our manufacturing, the intelligence, and also digitalization in different sectors. So as you can see on the slide, those are the China Unicom's map about 5G, our service network, and the application scenario. Basically, we follow the low frequency 2.1 and also the 900 MHz. Basically, 200 bandwidth can provide an outdoor broad field coverage. Indoor, we can provide 300 of bandwidth with very good indoor experience. So till today, we are discussing about the mmWave. If for the first phase of 5G is about an independent SA network, and the second half of 5G is to consider about the kind of a fusion and application of 5G with different sectors, so that in the 5G SA sector, we can let different industries to enjoy the benefit of 5G. And in this stage, we have the unified standard. I believe that for this whole industry and for the branches, maybe there is some kind of insufficiency. So I believe that as for the mmWave, the high precision positioning, the high speed, for certain micro scenario, that is a very good complementary part. So with this kind of guidance of principle, we have the IMT 2020 group under their leadership. China Unicom seized the opportunity of the Winter Olympics to promote the research and development of the millimeter wave, and also we already utilize a very mature industry chain, including terminal and also network devices. We've mainly done four things. One part is about the technology of a millimeter wave, and also mainly about the 200 bandwidth to support 800 spectrum. So those are the technological development and test. And secondly, we promote the standard development. And thirdly, we promote the kind of a network device and also terminal device maturity. And fourthly is, on one hand, we already use a very matured ecosystem of a millimeter wave, and also we promote the Chinese whole millimeter wave industry to go to maturity level. So from technology and device and terminal perspective, by now, I personally believe that the industry of a millimeter wave is already matured. What's more important is to explore the kind of high precision, high speed feature millimeter wave. We call them necessary and sufficient scenario. Maybe that would be our future direction, so that at the stage of 5G-A, the millimeter wave can perform their core value to different industry. That's all from me. Thank you very much.
May I ask you to bear with us for a few minutes over here, and then I will invite you again on stage. Okay, let's introduce our second panelist from China Telecom, Mr. Wang Hingyang, Director of Mobile and Terminal Technology Research at China Telecom Research Institute. Welcome. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Popular.
Well, dear guests, I'm from China Telecom. I am Wang Qingyang. Next page, please. This is my CV here. I'm in charge of the 5G implementation and also the vision research of 6G as well. So I do have a lot of experience in this regard. In so many years history of 5G, we still believe there's a lot of potential to discover. 5G-A is on the road. In the future, we still have 6G awaiting. So how to perform a good transition to 6G, that would be my main focus recently. So these are some basic information about our research institute. Actually, this is the China Telecom Research Institute. We have gone through several rounds of revolution. Beijing, Shanghai, and Guangzhou Institute, we organize them together. So totally we have 17 different departments. We have 3 major directions. One is the cloud network convergence, including 5G, 6G, the IP network, cloud computing, AI, future networks, etc. Those about the cloud network convergence. That is our major strategy. The second one is network and information security, for example, data security, cloud native security, etc. So those provide a very safe base for the future network. Third part is about the national test base or the national experiment base. We mainly provide the corporate operation a kind of research environment or experiment environment. So those above are the 3 major directions of our technology. And also we participate in a lot of national and international standard cooperation. For example, the ITOT, ISO, IEC, etc. Next page. All right, so this is our research achievements. Because our session theme is about mmWave and 5G-A is ready for a final implementation already. So we have some 26, 27 detail thing. We didn't mention it here. As you all know that the development of 5G now is like 2C. We still need to promote the development in terms of application or utilization. For 2B end, we're now strengthening our synergy with our industry partners because we haven't entered into the core production session yet. So for the next step, we need to know the industry better, to know how to be compatible with different industries in order to speed up or accelerate our entry into the core production side in order to facilitate the development of industry to create more value to the 2B end. So by now, the 5G implementation is kind of very important for the mmWave development and also 6G development. Is very inspirational and a lot of experience and afterthoughts. They are very useful and valuable for our future work. In terms of 5G-A, we're mainly promoting some kind of enhancing and coverage because the super uplink evolution or the super series is something that we co-promoted with our partners. For example, some uplink inversion and also the frequency adjustment to reduce some control paths to increase the efficiency, etc. So maybe we can have some collaboration for innovation. Currently, we have more than 30 programs being established, and also we have every year more than 1,000 to 2,000 international standard proposal. So we're very leading in terms of this regard. And also just now, Mr. Wu also mentioned we and China Unicom, we co-built, co-shared a lot of this kind of base, and this provide us a lot of a new development model. So last year, we published a 5G co-built and shared white paper that is also under the guidance of GSMA. And going forward, in 2021, we issued a 5G SA deployment guideline. So one is about SA, one is about co-built and shared. So these are some kind of practice we've done in China, and we hope that we can provide it as a reference. In terms of 6G, we've been researching in a 6G network architecture. For example, we lead the National Key R&D Program, the 6G Network Architecture and Key Technology Project, which is a project started since 2020 and has been going on for 3 years' time already. In this project, we proposed this kind of a new network architecture. And also we started the data-driven distributed autonomous architecture. Also in 6G, we started some basic research, for example, the RIS and also the ICC and also the prototype test and the self-developed 6G wireless simulation systems, etc. They're still prototype, very early stage tests. And also we developed a 6G wireless simulation system. So that is kind of a heritage from 5G era because we need to do some simulation before we develop a standard. And now we're developing the 6G features. That is also a foundation for our future work. Also, under our Dr. B, our chief expert in wireless, and also he is a fellow and used to work in another company, and we're doing a P-run, and that is about a proximity radio access network. We also have a short-term and a moderate to long-term goal. For short-term, we want to use the basic technology of Wi-Fi to realize a terminal connection and to the China mobile network. We've done some early stage trial for validation of the P-run concept of 6G. So based on the current technology and Wi-Fi D2D technology, so we developed some SDK and we integrate them into some application of China Telecom. And also, we now have an application called China Telecom. In that app, the customers can visit it and to when the area has a very limited internet coverage, they can actually use this technology to connect to the broadband. And now we have over 2 million visits. The daily active user is over like 10,000. So this is a very early trial and experiment. In the future, in 6G, we're going to do it further to work with our partners to do this thing together.
那么这个就是我们目前在
So these are our research in 6G, no matter 5G, 5.5G, as well as 6G, just as what our colleague mentioned in the just now. Actually, as he mentioned, actually the application and the demand is the most critical. When we advance 5G, we had a lot of reflections of that. So we hope that we can work with GSMA together, as well as our partner together to jointly work on the 5G, 5.5G, as well as the mmWave scenario, and to find a better direction for the development of the industry. That's all. Thank you.
For a couple of minutes, and then I will invite you back to the stage. Thank you. Next panelist, Dr. Hunan, who is the Vice Director, Department of Wireless and Terminal Technology Research at China Mobile Research Institute. Thanks for joining us. Thank you.
各位来宾，上午好，我叫湖南，来自于中国移动研究院。
Hello everyone, my name is Hu Nan. I'm responsible for the 5G standard stipulation as well as the advancement of industrial work. I'm very glad to participate in today's forum. Okay, it seems that we have the wrong slide.
But the next what are to?
If you go back one more.
Anyway， 大家都知道，中国移动呢现在已经建成了全球最大的这样。
Anyway, we know that China Mobile already have largest amount of base station, and by recently we have about 1.6 million, and we have about 30 billion users of our 5G network. And for the users of IoT, it's also approaching a large number, around 1 billion. And today we are very glad to be here and to share with you about the work and progress we've made in mmWave, and also would like to listen to the insights of the industry as well as the experience or deployment of our colleagues and the partners.
Our panelists back to the stage. So Mr. Wang and Mr. Wei. And we can get started with the panel discussion. Okay, so we saw from GSMA intelligence that millimeter wave spectrum for 5G services has been assigned in 20 countries worldwide, with Asia Pacific leading. So my first question would be thinking about the development and application of millimeter wave for 5G and 5G advanced in China. In your opinion, what are the main inspirations? And maybe we can start with Mr. Wei from China Unicom.
好，从刚才咱们几位。
From the sharing of the experts just now about the global development of millimeter wave, as well as the value creation in the whole world. First of all, I think in our country, for sub-6 band, we have the independent network, sub-network. I think the band of millimeter wave in the next step around the 5G, it is actually a very important and essential technology to cover the micro scenario and micro units. And based on this logic and this judgment, I believe that what's the future, how to play the role of millimeter wave in China. Personally, I think we need to actually use the millimeter wave comprehensively, use its high capacity, high speed, high precision feature. Because of its high precision, these are the three features of a millimeter wave, and we need to actually match it with the progress of 5G-A, 5G Advanced, and we need to work more on the integration with verticals. And we need to focus more on the 5G-A for some scenarios which is hard to integrate. And that's all from my side for now.
Thank you, Pablo。从目前来看，就是毫米波是在
Okay. Now, millimeter wave in United States as well as South Korea, there are already some applications, especially in the hotspot as well as in some studios, in some venues like this, which have requirements of a high capacity. There are a lot of scenarios already, use case already. And now for the millimeter wave band, actually it's really a wide range from 26.5 to 100 GHz. So for the operators as well as the demand side, there will be more options. And in terms of the bandwidth as well as the latency, it also have a lot of strengths. If the millimeter wave in certain region have an independent subnetwork, then for upward and downward ratio, it can be more flexible. So we can actually compare it with the applications and detail demand more flexibly. So there are lots of promising scenarios and also show very prominent features and strengths. So I believe that millimeter wave will provide a very good complement for the 5G's development in the future, especially in certain regions. It will play a really good feature and play a really good role. Thank you.
大家都比较清楚啊。其实中国呢，现在
We are all really clear that in China we have the 5G dominated by sub-6G, and since recently we released the sub-6, we've in China already built the largest 5G network in the whole world. And when we talk about millimeter wave, there is a big strength, that is, it has really high bandwidth, which can bring a very good capacity as well as high speed. And also we can set the frame structure very short, so it can also potentially conduce to a low latency. At the same time, millimeter wave also have some disadvantage. For example, there is a big loss in the wall penetration and also loss in the transmission. So there are some limits in the coverage. And in my consideration, I think that millimeter wave actually it's and sub-6G, they are complementary, and they are complement to each other. And sometimes we can use this millimeter wave technology together with the sub-6G, and in this way we can fully tap the potential of 5G network.
Throughout the week, we have seen a lot of progress that China is making on application of 5G technology for many use cases. Let's now talk about specific use cases for 5G millimeter wave in China. In your opinion, which use cases will lead in the early days of 5G millimeter wave deployment? And what are the aspirational use cases in the longer term? Maybe we can start with you, Mr. Wei.
就是哈。
Just now, we talk about millimeter wave in terms of the technology industry. I think it's already a mature technology, but in terms of the application, it's all need to be improved, because now, from the Winter Olympic, China Unicom has started to think about and made exploration about the middle and high frequency millimeter wave. We evaluated the pros and cons, and what are the suitable using case. And first of all, I think the big principle, the general principle is like for the within a certain fixed region, for the scenario-based application. Because millimeter wave, it's not a network millimeter wave, it's like a millimeter wave to support the business. It's not like a big infrastructure. So this is our evaluation, and under that there are several parts to consider. The first, for example, today in this conference hall, and have two hypotheses. If every forum need to have a live stream in the whole world. So everyone will become a person to shoot the conference and do the live stream. And then millimeter wave will be a very efficient technology for us to connect us with the people outside of this conference room, so the people in the whole world can feel and see with their own eyes about what is happening within this conference room. So it's actually very suitable for the big exhibitions, conferences, etc. So for the concurrent scenarios and this kind of large conference, I think it's one use case potentially very useful and very helpful. And the second one is because you tell about its low penetration. I've been thinking about for the workshop or the factories for industrial manufacturing. For example, it's like sometimes just like today's venue, which is like exhibition centers, they are actually more big space and they have relatively fixed procedures or producing manufacture process. They have already fixed production lines as well as preset defined process. And this time we need a high speed, wide bandwidth to have a high large amount of high accurate data. I think that this is also another scenario for the millimeter wave. So let's suppose that within the factory or workshop, and then in the upper layer there is a millimeter wave, and they have actually larger capacity, high speed. And in the bottom layer, we have manipulators, robots, these kinds of control units, and they can use the red cap, this kind of transmission efficiency, and plus and combined with a low latency feature of 5G, it's enough. So I think that maybe in the factory in the future, we can actually combine the millimeter wave with the already existing one, and by integrating the two, we can meet the demand of dispatchment as well as flexible manufacturing in the factories. And this is something we are exploring and something we are thinking about to use the millimeter wave in the future. And also for 2C side, in my perspective, for X2, in order to have a upscale, we need to actually use the bare eye technology. If we need the extra goggle or extra device to deliver this immersive experience to the user, then this is not a 2C business. This must be a fixed business in a demonstration area, and it's actually a large-scale one when it is 2C. So if we cannot upscale it, we can actually evolve it into a 2C system. I think now it's actually still have some challenge, and there is some. That's about the sharing of some of my opinion, and correct me if I make mistake.
Thank you. So, Mr. Wang, any additional use cases on top of what we have about from Mr. Wei?
Thank you.
Well, just now, Professor Wei already introduced to us a lot of scenarios and user case. I want to supplement with some cases. For example, for millimeter wave, of course, the big bandwidth is a very typical advantage of it. And for a scenario when they need a high bandwidth, it is very good kind of use, and also a kind of uplink and downlink is very flexible. So for this kind of big uplink and big bandwidth scenario, for millimeter wave will be a very good technology. For example, for live streaming and for exhibition, etc. That is about bandwidth. And also, secondly, expert Professor Hu now also mentioned that indeed the millimeter wave can actually design a big interval, so the slot market will be short. The slot time will be short, so give us a certain response time. For example, in industry, manufacturing, they can have even low latency, and that is not 100% very important. We also have other indicators, for example, the packet loss, etc. But actually, the absolute latency can be the lowest. The experiment minimum can be 1.5 millisecond. So in industry, it is actually very useful and beneficial. And also, like Professor Wei mentioned, in hotspot scenario, we've done some experiments actually in Shanghai. We actually have under the Shanghai authorities' governance, with 3 operators together have done some kind of co-built, co-shared experiment in Shanghai subway. That is using mmWave to provide a return that in the subway, we have a sub 6G a PRU connect. You can use your mobile phone to connect. But actually, the kind of return from the carriage to the ground, we use a 26G of a millimeter wave. The average frequency is 1.2 Gbps. Actually, that is a very conservative data, 1.2 Gbps. That is average frequency. And we have done several subway stations experiments. Those are some early stage experiments, and those are cases for your reference. Thank you very much.
So pretty much use cases spanning all consumer as well as enterprise markets across different vertical industries. And Dr. Hu, what's your view on use cases?
Well, just now, Dr. Wei and Wang already mentioned a lot about the user case, and I quite agree with them. So actually, the early stage scenario are mainly to fully perform the kind of a big bandwidth and low latency feature of millimeter wave. And in the same time, we know the pros or cons. It might have some shortage in terms of coverage. So, for example, in factories or in the kind of a certain singing, concert, etc., they might have some kind of a weakness. In the future, when we have some killer level milliwave, to be friendly, I don't know what would be the best scenario for that. But actually, with the improvement of capability of coverage of millimeter wave and with the cut down in cost, in the future we'll have more scenarios suitable for our millimeter wave. That would be the thing I can think about now.
Thank you. Now, the next question is, obviously, 5G millimeter wave is running in parallel with other technologies. So my question to Mr. Wang will be, what technologies can 5G millimeter wave combine with in order to maximize the benefits of a 5G millimeter wave?
Well, like Dr. Hu mentioned, that because of the high frequency, so the coverage is a kind of a weakness of a millimeter wave. So we're trying to enhance the coverage. For example, RIS. We can use the technology of RIS to expand the coverage of a millimeter wave to avoid the kind of blind area of coverage. So these are very typical cases. For example, 5.5 and 6G, people are also researching the application of RIS. From that perspective, we can know that this kind of coverage enhancement technology can reduce the future investment to increase the ROI of it. That would be a typical additional technology to combine with millimeter wave. And also, I personally believe that the coordination between millimeter wave and sub-6G is an important direction as well. We can use the sub-6G hertz as a very good basic coverage to provide the mmWave with a continuous service, because type 26 and above plus mmWave, the coverage continuity can be better guaranteed and improved. So that would be a future direction what operators will think about. And thirdly, nowadays, actually, we have 1042, etc. for mmWave. The kind of velocity or rate management would be very important. Thank you very much.
And Mr. Wei, so we have been talking about networks, technology, and use cases. In your opinion, what else needs to be done to drive and scale the use of 5G millimeter wave in China? What is that should China consider for my 5G millimeter wave?
Well, for the millimeter wave, I think under the joint effort of the global industry chain, the industry is very mature, technology is very mature, but we have several things that need to be done better in China in terms of millimeter wave. Firstly, is we should explore necessary and sufficient application scenario. So no matter by jointly or independently, we have done different scenario experiment first. So that is about the first point, about scenario migration. And secondly, if we want to use millimeter wave as a kind of additional enhancement based on 5.5 or 6G, maybe we should consider that under different environments, the kind of a mutual interruption or interference, etc. The technology deployment, the engineering deployment technology is more important than the device technology of millimeter wave. That is the second point I want to make. And thirdly, we need to promote the Chinese domestic terminals, especially the modules, etc., to support the different terminals. Only in this way can we be very comprehensive. And also, like we can see, we are clarifying about a 6G frequency range. So maybe when it's necessary, when it's valuable scenario, I personally believe actually the policy of spectrum also need to be considered. Thank you.
And Dr. Hu, would you like to add your thoughts on what else needs to be done in China for 5G millimeter wave?
刚才魏院长
Well, actually, Professor Wei has mentioned a lot. The industry chain is very mature, but I actually have two additional needs. One is in terms of base station. Now we still have a limited number of base station. And because for the micro station, the coverage is very limited. So that for millimeter wave, it is an additional backdrop. So if you want to have more scenario, we hope we can have different type of stations, and also in terms of terminal. Now the maximum bandwidth terminal can support is 200. In the future, if you want to fully explore the feature of the big bandwidth of millimeter wave, maybe the terminal also need to improve, for example, 400, 500, or even 1G bandwidth in order to fully utilize the advantage of millimeter wave. Just now, like the GSMA colleague mentioned, it's not something like if, it is about when technology. And I think sooner or later, with millimeter wave, will have a successful case in China.
Okay, we now have time for a couple of questions from the audience. Any questions? Yes, we have one. Thank you.
Sorry, the interpreter cannot hear. All right. I want to ask a question to you. Now for sub-6 and millimeter wave, there is no any terminal which can do the redundant switching between them. We've been mentioning that millimeter wave, if it's going to supplement the sub-6, then in terms of the low latency and high bandwidth, however, the terminals cannot switch. So, in terms of scenario application, we're encountering with big challenges. So, how to improve that? Thank you. How about I'll try first. On one hand, the fundamental solutions to lead the whole industry. We hope that the terminal can support both sub-6G and millimeter wave, so that in various scenarios, it can actually support different user case in the same time. And also, like Dr. Wang also mentioned, that we are cooperating with Shanghai. Maybe sub-6G can link another Wi-Fi, like use a CPE as a method. Because now almost all terminals can support Wi-Fi. Under that condition, maybe we can change it to Wi-Fi to actually be a buff for the current problem. Okay, thank you. So actually for the millimeter wave and for sub-6G, I think the terminal thing will not be a big issue in the future. It can be resolved. More importantly, we need to consider about the expansion of application of millimeter wave. Besides the connection, we can actually expand it for further applications. I don't have time to mention it just now. Actually, in the future, we'll have more different user scenarios. After we expand user scenarios, we can have a segmentation. If you consider about link, maybe you should multi-rate synergy. For example, you might have expansion in application, for example, sensory, etc. So you can see in exhibition hall some extension of detection, etc. So for those pure application, maybe they will not pursue for this kind of multi-spectrum coordination. Thank you.
One over there. Thank you, Luis.
I'm from a local information consulting company. I want to ask you the most brief and critical question to the three of you. What is the most typical scenario for millimeter wave? What is the main frequency of it?
Thank you. And this is a really straightforward question. Actually, it's really hard for me to answer. When we talk about a technology, we must discuss it based on the current situation. If we only discuss the millimeter wave, it's really very ideal. We need to talk about the foundation, the operators, and we need to have already a basic network like 4.9G, 3.5G of China Mobile, China Unicom. We've already done a lot of explorations. I think for 2B, there's a lot more to do. In the future, there's still a big room. And we need to actually, for 5.5 and 6G, there are a lot of room to explore. And we can't predict which technology will be the dominant, will be the mainstream, will have the maximum benefit. Different technologies will compete among each other. So I think we will wait and see to check who has the best, most sophisticated technology, lowest cost, can bring extra value. And then this will be the definitely dominant one in the future. Thank you.
The discussions for another 20 minutes, but unfortunately we need to move to the next speakers. So I would like to say thanks to all of you for joining and for sharing your views. Thank you.
Thank you, Pablo.
Thank you.